other massive news, none so more prominent than the recent news that's come out in the last hour regarding Amari Cooper being traded to the Buffalo Bills, which we'll touch on maybe after the main bit of news, which is obviously Davante Adams, formerly of the Las Vegas Raiders, formerly of James's team, has been traded to Johnny's team, the New York Jets. This is only 7 days after Robert Saleh was fired. He's gone for a conditional third rounder next year, but it can turn into a second if he becomes a second or first team Pro Bowler, or if he's on the active roster, if and when, Johnny, the Jets make the AFC Championship or the Super Bowl. So, a match that we've seen before, a match made in heaven that we've seen before in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams. We'll go to Johnny, obviously, to begin with, being the stupid New York Jet fan who stayed up all night last night to watch his team lose to the Buffalo Bills. Sure, they'd have enjoyed Davante Adams on the field last night, wouldn't they, Johnny?
Yes, well, obviously, Davante Adams knew, the Jets 2-4 with a struggling O-line, a rush defense that is, doesn't look great, and a kicker who can't kick field goals from 20 yards. He's come to chase a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. The Jets have completely mortgaged their entire franchise on going for it with Rodgers. I think, last week I was thinking about it, and there was talk of, it was becoming obvious that Adams was on his way to New York. I think, particularly in the betting markets, I think it was as low as 1 to 3 odds on to come to New York. He's now arrived, and for the 31-year-old who we know what he can produce. Potentially giving up a second rounder for someone who has perhaps not had a great time with it in the last.
Let's be honest, Johnny. It's not going to be a second rounder. Let's maybe bring that back down to
There's some good negotiating in those conditions. To be fair, I know you signed off on that in the Las Vegas organization, but
I actually think this is the. People were saying, the Jets really need him. I think if you watched the game last night, obviously Garrett Wilson and Alan Lazard had really good games and are both having really good seasons. But beyond them two, the Jets don't really have anything in the air. Mike Williams, unfortunately, can't catch a cold at the moment, and Rodgers, blamed him for the late interception. I think if we were able to spread the ball a bit more, if we were able to take defenders off from marking Garrett Wilson through the acquiring someone like Davante Adams, then I think that's obviously going to help. Sure, we've got huge issues. I think for me, offensive line, the run game looked really good last night, but Rodgers was getting pressured from all over. Tyron Smith, who has been an X factor offensive tackle for the last decade or so, hasn't really turned up in New York. I think there's a bit of gelling work that needs to be done with the unit. I've mentioned a couple of the other sort of problems that the Jets have had in the last couple of weeks, but Adams definitely makes us better. I think you can see from the rapport that Lazard has with Rodgers and how good he's looked over the last few weeks compared to how he did last year. Surely that points a good sign for Davante Adams. So, I think it definitely improves the Jets, but there are a lot more issues. We're 2-4, man. It's a must-win game against the Steelers. If we lose that, I'm not even sure we're going to make the playoffs. So I think Davante Adams is taking a huge risk if he's chasing the Super Bowl. Wants to do it with Rodgers by this time next week. Well, we're expecting Rodgers maybe to have another crack at it next year, but worrying signs for the Jets. But there is some excitement there from me with this trade. It's good to see a superstar, I suppose, coming to your team. and the
it's a
Jets
big
are looking
name.
very.
Like,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
a big name to get
in.
in. Like this name has star power. Like, okay, it doesn't have the star power of 5 years ago, but it's it was like the whole Chapel Roan thing. This will be your artist's favorite artist. Like, he is the receiver's favorite receiver. Like, everyone, that was the big thing on the Netflix series this year that he was on. Like, everyone loves Davante Adams within the NFL, who's a receiver. They all look up to him. They all know how good he is. So I don't think there's nothing wrong with you being like, yeah, it's not what we need, but it's a coup. Like, of course, it's a coup.
Absolutely. I like I say, I think it improves us. It's not necessarily what we need, but it's like saying, I don't know, if just having that extra sort of piece gives you another sort of option. Doesn't quite, it's a bit of a stopgap, I suppose. You're not covering the hole that's letting all the water rush in. You're just doing something to prevent the inevitable. But yeah, like I say, another weapon. Let's see Rodgers cook. Exciting times.
Well, so far, James, this year he's played 3 games for you guys, 18 receptions, 209 yards, and a touchdown. Obviously moved to the Raiders in 2022, ultimately to play with his college quarterback, Derek Carr.
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as Derek Carr went, wasn't the writing on the wall that this was going to happen with Davante Adams? Because, he left Green Bay because he always felt like he probably didn't get the credit he deserved, maybe wanted more money, etc. Wanted to move, but definitely wrote his own narrative of where he wanted to move to because he wanted to play with Derek Carr. And I'm sure there was lots of teams on the market for him at that point.
Yeah.
Derek Carr goes, you ultimately don't draft a quarterback this cycle round when there was plenty on the table. You could have moved up and instead you go for Brock Bowers. That maybe had been something for him that had been maybe enticing to him. But as a Raiders fan, this obviously, when he announced that he wanted to move on from the team, that should have been no surprise for you at all.
No, it's been grumbling for a lot of last season as well. I think after Carr went, we brought in Garoppolo, and Garoppolo couldn't make the kind of throws that were going to open up the field to allow Davante Adams to do what Davante Adams does best. Funny thing is, over the last 2 years, so in 2022, he caught 100 of 180 for just over 1,500 yards, an average of 15.2 and 14 touchdowns. 14 touchdowns is, I think in Green Bay, his most was 18, and 14 would have been his joint second most from his time in Green Bay. So he was still producing. The following year, when, the quarterback issues were again a big concern, and we brought in Aidan O'Connell, and they sort of managed to win that game on Christmas against the Chiefs without actually throwing the ball in after the first quarter or something. But he still was 103 from 175, 1,144 yards, 11.1 average, and 8 touchdowns. He can still produce. He just needs somebody to get him the ball. But he was grumbling last year that he didn't like the quarterback play, and he didn't really like Gruden, and Gruden went and everything else. And I don't really think he's ever been happy since Carr left. And when you move to a team to play with a guy, then then that guy goes, unless you immediately replace him with another superstar, that's going to be difficult to keep him happy. What I would say is that he's still got it. I mean, we've seen even this year in the games that he's played, I think it was against, it was early on, one of the first few games, I think it was against Baltimore. There's like a toe tap grab where he's like out on the side, like his body's out and his feet are in, and he's, and you made the point, he's like the receiver's receiver. But if you ask similarly the corners who they don't want to line up against, who's the most difficult to receiver to cover, he's still always in the top 5 because he's so shifty, and he's got that experience and that guile that some of the younger guys just don't have yet. I do think this opens up a lot for New York, because what having Davante Adams does is takes pressure off Wilson, like you've said, takes pressure off Lazard, but it also gives them an extra man to cover. It stops, in my mind, oppositions loading the box and swamping that line where it's been such a problem so far, and Aaron Rodgers getting so much pressure, and it stops your run game from going as well. It forces players into the into the backfield to cover more receivers. And so I think Rodgers might get a bit more time. Your run game, which looked good last night, might get going a little bit more now as well. And I just think because he knows the Rodgers playbook, because Aaron Rodgers is so in control of that offense, everything runs through him, and his offense and his scheme is so notoriously difficult, especially for younger guys to pick up, or first times, like Mike Williams is the perfect example. I think this is 2 weeks where he's sort of dropped or missed 2 passes right at the end of games that have led to sort of interceptions, and that's been the game over because he just hasn't quite been in the right place. Well, Davante Adams will be in the right place, and Garrett Wilson will probably be in the right place because he seems to have picked up pretty well, and Lazard will usually be in the right place. He just hasn't. He isn't the most reliable pair of hands that Adams is. So I think what you've got is you'll still see Wilson as your number 1 guy. You'll see Davante Adams come in as a joint first, come second.
You really think that Garrett still holds the number 1 spot? Just
because he's quicker, shiftier. I think he's just got that little bit more off the line. I think it would be. We'll see Adams get targeted a lot, and it might be a split first kind of feel. But I do still think that Garrett Wilson will be Rodgers' number 1 because his rapport is there now. His rapport hasn't been with Rodgers with Adams for a couple of years. It might be that Adams has lost a step. I mean, obviously Rodgers has too. And so there might be some little adjustment period. Obviously, he's supposedly still got a hamstring problem, whether that's a legit problem or was just a way to get himself off the field while he negotiated his trades. I mean, it is what it is. But if he has still got that problem, that's something to consider. He's not, if he jumps straight back in this week, he hasn't got a hamstring problem. Let's just put it that way. But yeah, I still think Wilson is the number 1 guy there. But you're going to see a lot less reps for Mike Williams. Mike Williams might, could even be a late trade candidate himself if he just doesn't fancy playing bench warmer. Or, I mean, I don't know. Do you move Mike Williams like into the slot more, or do you just sit him out and play more tight ends and three receivers? And I don't know. Obviously, I don't speculation, but I think he can do a lot for your offense other than just catch the ball. Like I say, I'm hoping the run game opens up if the oppositions don't load the box so much. If they do continue to, then you're going to see Adams and Wilson catch a lot more passes from Rodgers. So it's disappointing to see him go, but not surprising. I think the compensation is about fair. He is 31, coming as 32. I mean, he was saying the last few weeks, apparently, this isn't how I want my career to end. I mean, all right, he's a 3-time first team All-Pro, 6-time Pro Bowler, 2 times he's led the NFL in receiving touchdowns, but he doesn't have a ring, and he wasn't winning one this year. And it's going to be a stretch for him to win one with New York this time around, just given the current record and the situation with the O-line and stuff. So this looks like, for me, try and get things back on track as much as you can this year, and then shoot it next year. Next year, it's all in this year, but I would say it's more all in next year as well. Give Rodgers another shot. See if you can strengthen in draft recruitment or cheaper deals for middling guys that you can rotate a lot more, and then have a crack at it then when hopefully everything's up and running from the start as you want it to be, not a third of the way through the season, But they could still do a lot this time.
He's restructured his deal, hasn't he, as well? I think he's restructured so he is cheaper this year. This is it.